The old forest loomed, dark and mysterious, a perfect place to camp, they thought. Mark, the adventurous one, had convinced his friends.
It'll be fun and adventure.
Sarah, the cautious one, wasn't so sure, but she went along, trusting her friends. David, the quiet one, just shrugged. He was happy to be included. As they unloaded the car, excitement filled the air. The woods seemed to watch them, silent and still. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues. The friends set up camp, laughing and joking. They built a fire, the flames casting a warm glow on their faces. Stories and jokes were shared. But as darkness deepened, the mood shifted. The forest came alive with sounds, rustling leaves, snapping twigs. The laughter faded, replaced by an uneasy silence. Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter.
Let's explore.
Mark exclaimed, his voice a little too loud. The excitement in his tone was palpable, echoing through the dense forest. The group had been planning this expedition for weeks, each member bringing their own unique skills and enthusiasm to the table. They were a mix of amateur archaeologists, thrill-seekers and history buffs, all united by a common goal: to uncover the secrets hidden within these ancient woods. He disappeared into the trees, flashlight beam dancing. The forest was alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, adding an eerie soundtrack to their adventure. The beam of Mark's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing glimpses of twisted branches and the occasional glint of animal eyes. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a reminder of the forest's age and mystery. David followed close behind, his eyes wide with nervous anticipation. Sarah hesitated, then followed. The group moved cautiously, each step crunching on the forest floor. They were acutely aware of the legends surrounding these woods, tales of lost civilizations and hidden treasures, but also of curses and restless spirits. The thrill of discovery was tempered by a sense of foreboding, a feeling that they were not alone. They stumbled upon a clearing bathed in moonlight. The trees parted to reveal a serene, almost magical space. The moonlight cast long shadows, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. It was as if they had stepped into a different realm, a place untouched by time. The clearing was silent, the usual forest sounds muted, adding to the sense of isolation and mystery. In the center, half buried in the dirt, lay a wooden box, which was an incongruous sight, this man-made object amidst the natural beauty of the clearing. The box was covered in dirt and leaves, suggesting it had been there for a long time. The group gathered around it, their curiosity piqued. What secrets did it hold? Who had left it here, and why? It was ornately carved, ancient symbols etched into its surface. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each symbol telling a story of its own. The carvings were unlike anything they had seen before, hinting at a culture long forgotten. The box seemed to hum with energy, as if it were alive. The group could feel the weight of history pressing down on them, the significance of their discovery slowly sinking in. Mark pried it open, revealing a tarnished silver talisman. The talisman was intricately designed, its surface marred by the passage of time. It was clear that this object had once been of great importance. The group stared at it in awe, each member lost in their own thoughts. What was its purpose? Who had crafted it, and for what reason? The talisman seemed to hold the answers to their questions, if only they could decipher its secrets. It was cold to the touch, sending a shiver down Sarah's spine. The chill seemed to penetrate her very soul, a stark contrast to the warm night air. She could feel the talisman's power, its history and its mystery. The group exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them. They had come here seeking adventure, but they had found something much more profound. The past had reached out to them, and they were ready to uncover its secrets. They passed the talisman around, each feeling a strange energy emanating from it. Mark laughed it off, slipping it into his pocket.
A souvenir,
he said, winking at Sarah. But as they made their way back to camp, the forest seemed to press in on them. Whispers seemed to drift from the trees just out of reach. Shadows seemed to move just beyond the beam of their flashlights. Sarah could feel her heart pounding in her chest. Back at the campsite, the fire had dwindled to glowing embers. The once roaring flames that provided warmth and comfort were now reduced to a faint glow, casting long, eerie shadows around the campsite. The night was growing colder, and the darkness seemed to press in from all sides, making the small circle of light feel even more fragile. They threw more wood on, the flames struggling to catch. Each piece of wood was added with a sense of urgency, as if the fire was their only defense against the encroaching darkness. The flames flickered and sputtered, fighting to stay alive, but the shadows seemed to grow bolder, dancing closer with each passing moment. But the shadows remained, dancing at the edge of the light. They twisted and contorted, taking on shapes that played tricks on the mind. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig seemed amplified, making the shadows appear almost alive, as if they were watching and waiting for the right moment to pounce.
Did you see that? Over there, in the darkness. The voice was tinged with fear, eyes wide as they scanned the tree line. It was as if the darkness itself was hiding something sinister, something that was just out of sight, but always present.
I thought I saw a figure standing there, its eyes glowing red. The words hung in the air, heavy with dread. The figure had been there, just for a moment, but its presence was undeniable. Those glowing eyes had pierced through the darkness, sending a chill down their spines. But when I blinked, it was gone. The forest was empty again, but the feeling of being watched remained. It was as if the figure had melted back into the shadows, waiting for the next opportunity to reveal itself.
This is getting too weird. I don't like this at all. The unease was palpable, and the fear in their voices was growing. The forest, once a place of adventure and exploration, had turned into a realm of nightmares.
Mark was jumpy, his usual confidence shaken. He was the one who always led the group, the one who never showed fear. But now his eyes darted around nervously and his hands trembled slightly. The weight of the situation was pressing down on him, and it was clear that he was struggling to keep his composure. He kept glancing over his shoulder, his hand hovering near the talisman in his pocket. The talisman was supposed to be a source of protection, a charm against evil. But now it felt like a fragile barrier against the unknown forces that seemed to be closing in on them. David said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. He was the quiet one, the thinker, always analyzing and observing. His silence now was not out of fear, but out of contemplation. He was trying to piece together the puzzle to understand what was happening, but the more he thought, the more elusive the answers became. The forest held its secrets tightly, and it seemed that it was not ready to reveal them just yet. The next day, the strange occurrences continued. Supplies went missing. Footprints appeared, leading to and from their campsite, but they were not their own. Fear turned to paranoia.
Sarah, are you trying to scare me?
Me? What about you, David? Is this some kind of prank?
We shouldn't have taken it.
David, his voice barely a whisper, claimed it was the talisman.
We shouldn't have taken it,
he muttered, his eyes filled with fear. That night, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sleep was impossible.
I lay awake, listening to the sounds of the forest.
Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. Sarah scrambled to her feet, her heart racing. Mark and David were gone. The campsite was in disarray, their belongings scattered everywhere. The talisman lay on the ground, gleaming in the moonlight.
Mark, David, where are you?
Sarah called out for her friends, her voice trembling with fear. But the only answer was the echo of her own voice. She searched for hours, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but there was no sign of Mark or David, just the endless trees, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Exhausted and terrified, Sarah collapsed by the dying embers of the fire. The talisman lay beside her, cold and heavy in her hand. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of grey and purple, Sarah made a decision. She had been coming to this forest for weeks, drawn by an inexplicable force. Each visit left her more unsettled, more aware of the ancient presence that seemed to watch her every move. The forest, with its towering trees and thick underbrush, held secrets that whispered to her in the rustling leaves and the calls of distant birds. Today she felt a sense of urgency, a need to act before it was too late. She carefully placed the talisman back in its wooden box, burying it once more in the clearing. The talisman, an artifact of unknown origin, had been passed down through generations in her family. It was said to hold great power, but also great danger. Sarah's grandmother had warned her never to use it, to keep it hidden from the world. But curiosity had gotten the better of her, and now she was paying the price. As she covered the box with earth, she whispered a silent prayer, hoping to contain the darkness she had unleashed. She left the forest, her heart heavy with grief and a chilling certainty. The weight of her actions pressed down on her, each step away from the clearing feeling like a betrayal of her family's legacy. She had hoped to find answers, to understand the power of the talisman, but instead she had awakened something far more sinister. The forest seemed to close in around her, the shadows lengthening as if to follow her home. She knew she couldn't escape the consequences of her actions. Something lurked in those woods, something ancient and evil. It had been there long before her family had settled in the area, a malevolent force that thrived on fear and despair. The stories told by the elders spoke of a time when the forest was a place of light and life, but that time had long passed. Now, it was a place of shadows and secrets where the unwary could easily lose their way. Sarah could feel its presence, a cold, creeping sensation that made her skin crawl. And it had been awakened. The talisman, once a symbol of protection, had become a beacon for the darkness. Sarah could sense the change in the air, the way the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. She knew that whatever she had unleashed was now free to roam, to seek out its next victim. The thought filled her with dread, but also a grim determination. She couldn't let it end like this. She had to find a way to stop it, to put the evil back to rest.
But was it the talisman itself, or something drawn to its power? The question gnawed at her, a constant reminder of her own ignorance. She had thought she could control it, that she could use its power for good. But now she wasn't so sure. The talisman had a will of its own, a dark intelligence that seemed to mock her efforts. She wondered if it had always been this way, or if her actions had somehow corrupted it. The line between good and evil had never seemed so blurred.
The question echoed in Sarah's mind, a haunting reminder of the horrors she had witnessed. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the forest itself was alive with malevolent intent. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent her heart racing. She knew she had to find answers, to understand the true nature of the talisman and the evil it had awakened. But time was running out, and the darkness was closing in. Sarah steeled herself for the journey ahead, knowing that the fate of her family and perhaps the world depended on her success.